There is nothing simpler than the truth. What conventional thinkers do is think the truth is all-encompassing and that the truth represents a totality. The conventional view is that the truth is simple in the sense that it represents a uniformity or is a conformity of facts. They are not technically wrong, but not understanding the logic of truth, they feel that all that is true can be represented by a single, monolithic theory. The theory of everything is expected to be a single, all-encompassing explanation of all truth. But truth cannot be represented by 0, nor by 1. If all truth was a negative, it would not exist. It would mean truth is absent, which would not make sense. But there is no universe of truth, either. We all know that the truth is not a negative and no one argues for a negative truth, but that leaves people assuming truth is a unified whole. In the minds of most thinkers, truth can be and is encompassed by a single hypothesis or explanation. This single explanation of reality or single unified theory of what reality is referred to here as the one reality hypothesis, or H. This assumption is necessarily false. Meaning, whatever reality is, it cannot be a single, consistent substance. Truth cannot be represented as a single, unified universe. The conventional thinking about simplicity and about reality cannot be justified by logic or by observation. We need to keep it simple, but trying to make the facts fit a paradigm that is only simple because it is blind to its own contradictions, is not helpful. This ought to be obvious, but for some reason it is not. The Bible makes it clear there are two races and two realities. Scripture presents these as the reality of God and the corrupted reality of Satan. Interestingly, Christians and apostates disagree with this depiction, but Christians assume we live in the reality created by God, whereas atheists deny this and argue we live in a natural reality, one in which there is no God. This also gives us the basis for the contention there are two races. There is the race of those who live in the flesh and the race of the spiritually mature, who live in the Spirit. We know from Scripture these groups and realities do not overlap. We must die to one to live in the other. Naturally, no one is obliged to believe in the Bible nor to take its arguments as conclusive. But rejecting the arguments made in Scripture are far more difficult than atheists understand. This biblical reality is actually very simple. But the truth is, the reader probably does not understand why the two-reality hypothesis, TRH, is the simplest explanation for everything we see around us and what we have seen play out throughout history. To begin with, the ORH is flawed, seriously so. It purports to contain all possible variations, but it cannot. In fact, its very claim is inherently contradictory. What it claims is similar to the statement that everything is relative. How can everything be relative if relativity is posited as an absolute? The absoluteness of relativity is incompatible with its premise. There is no center or standard in relativity. Which means nothing can be qualitatively distinguished from anything else. We run into this same sort of intellectual paradox when thinking about reality as a physical substance. Physical reality cannot be everything because it would mean it is alive. People do not think of it this way, but if reality had a beginning, the source of its beginning had to come from outside of it. This creates an infinite regression unless the source of reality is sentient or the universe itself is sentient. There is no logical way around the need for God. Either God created the universe or the universe is God. We do not need to use the term God, but the language we use for a self-caused universe is the same language we use to describe God. All the non-God solutions are dishonest because they try and claim time had no start or space has no boundaries, conflicting with the definitions. Our arguments state to lose credibility of our terms of debate cease to have meaning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Our language is our sentience. Our words are our reality. Time without a beginning or end is a time that contains all possibilities. The same goes with space. If it has no boundaries, then everything will be found within it. We might tentatively postulate an infinite time and space, but by doing so we create the same contradiction we form when we claim reality is a single all-encompassing hypothesis. If reality is universal, then it must contain infinite time and space. But it cannot because these things are both relative and absolute. How can anything have meaning, if everything, including meaning, is relative? There cannot be any meaning or purpose if everything is relative. As the philosophers of phenomenalism finally concluded, if there is no God then life itself is absurd. It has no meaning, nor can it be given meaning. The best we can do is create meaning knowing all the while there is nothing that has meaning. If there is no meaning to life, then why do we struggle so hard to retain it? If every culture has the same value, what difference does it make which culture one lives in? If our culture has no more value than your culture, why ought we to let you prioritize your culture over ours? This only demonstrates the absurdity of the relativist viewpoint. If all cultures are relative, then the culture that thinks it has a right to exist is evil. Nothing that is relative ought to exist because the absence of culture is as valid a culture as a culture then has existence. There is no way to make the relativist paradigm make sense. It cannot, because how can relativity make sense, if meaning is relative to nonsense? Technically, we cannot even defend the relativistic paradigm without demonstrating it is the preferred paradigm, which makes no sense. Every choice we make conflicts with relativity. If we can make a choice, then we have seen differences and we have viewed features that have value to us, and other features we do not value except in the negative sense. Relativity is nothing more, or less, than an attack on sentience. Sentient beings are not compatible with relativistic worldviews. Interestingly, globalism is a relativistic viewpoint. If one is a relativist, one is a globalist, and if one is a globalist, one thinks cultures are just options without any meaningful differences. One cannot talk unless we talk the metaphysical position that the meaning of a word is an absolute. The meaning of a word might change, but it must still have meaning to retain the identity of a word. But if all cultures and nations and ways of life have equal value, none of them have any value, so why ought globalism be preferred? More importantly, if we cannot look at all the options and pick out a preferred one, how are we human? Humanity is choice encapsulated. Now we think animals have choices because they pick one thing over another. This choice is based in physical need. Humans also pick what foods to eat and what temperature they will live in, but this is not the kind of choice we are talking about here. Humans make choices based on physical needs, but we make choices based on analytical reasoning and on morality. We do what we think is right, irrespective of what the flesh would want. This is why mankind can engage in war. Choices based on the needs of the flesh are nominal. Such choices lack meaning. Human choice is not merely about fulfilling physical needs but rather about discerning, evaluating, and assigning values to options beyond mere survival. This is what distinguishes the human condition, the capacity to reflect, to judge, and to pursue principles, ideals, and purposes that transcend basic instinct. When we strip away the possibility of objective values, as radical relativism does, we undermine the foundation upon which meaningful choice is built. Without the ability to recognize real differences in value, purpose, or meaning, the very exercise of choosing becomes hollow. Thus, defending the idea that some things are truly preferable or meaningful is not just an intellectual exercise, it is essential for sustaining what it means to be human. But for this to happen, we need more than the choices of an immediate situation. Choices cannot be reactive only. Choices that lead to immediate action are okay for animals. Birds build nests and other creatures make burrows. Other animals will travel long distances to breeding and feeding areas. Animals show a capacity to make choices connected with future events. However, the precursor to that decision remains in the here and now. It is changes in the here and now that precipitates the activity that prompts them to act in a way that is akin to following a plan. Humans live with an eye to an invisible future. Humans have an objective that is not tied to the present, or only in the most tenuous of ways. This is why our future often looks so very different from our past. Humans have purpose, and it is this purpose that permits those who have one, to evaluate their choices in the present. We choose options based on their relevance to our purpose. But ontology is a difficult thing to prove, and were we even driven by an envisioned future, it is difficult to get everyone to see the future in the same way. Everyone does not share the same purpose, and some do not seem to have any purpose at all guiding them. At the same time, we need to understand that as complicated as life might seem, there must be a single source of our problems. Problems cannot be original, spontaneous, or uncaused. Every problem is really a symptom of a singular problem that defines the system we are in. All of our issues flow from the same source. Unemployment is a problem, but it cannot be solved because it is not a true problem, it is a symptom of a problem. To solve all of the symptoms, we have to identify the real problem. We need to identify the true source of our problems. There can only be one problem, epistemologically as well as logically. Logically, there can only be one problem because problems cannot arise independently of the system they are in. There can only be one problem epistemologically because there is only one thing which is capable of causing problems. This central problem is the system that creates or gives rise to the problems we encounter. These problems we have are not extraneous, they are an integral part of the system they are found in. A problem is a lack of choice, or more correctly, a problem is that which destroys choices. A problem is a stripping away from us, things that we value, for it is these things that give us our choices. Another way of saying this is by saying a problem is the theft of what belongs to us, for the good of someone who did not justify the claim. Those who take what does not belong to them, are parasites. Parasitism is the source of all of our problems. When people claim what was created by another, they cause problems. The problems are symptoms of the parasitism which is the real problem. The state has no resources of its own, so can only rob Peter to benefit Paul. This is why the state is a parasite, and its allies are parasites also. The only solution to our problems is to eliminate parasite and parasitism, and this include the biggest parasite of them all, the state. We do not have choices if we lack property. Parasites take choices from us by taking property from us, so they obtain the property belonging to us, and the choices that adhere to this property also becomes theirs. Every dollar represents a choice to the person who has it. That dollar of value is either a choice for the person who earned it, or a choice for the person who stole it. And so, that is all that life comes down to, we either have a choice, or we do not. If we have a choice, we earned it or took it off someone else. We are either parasites living off of others, or we are a priorians, which denotes a person who loves life and honors the living and the honorable dead. In other words, it all comes down to choice and those who produce them and those who consume them.